Welcome back. We mentioned at our last meeting, I think it was on the 19th, that we would be coming back to meet either last Thursday or this coming week. And Monday worked out well because we already had the board coming in for a work session tonight. So we're going to have the board instead have their meeting tonight at 6, and then they'll go into their work session from 7. So that worked out pretty well to have it on today, so thanks for giving up on Monday morning. Sometimes it's a little difficult on Sunday night when you know you gotta get up a little bit earlier to crank it up, but thanks for coming in. I'll turn it over to Ryan Hill first. He's gonna review some of the county and some of the district data.
Do you have the screen presented? Not yet. Do they already have the back here?
Everybody's seen this. Yeah.
All right, good morning, everyone. First things first, we will take a look at our historical Dodge County cases. As you can see, when we met last time, we were at that pretty good peak back in, I think we met the 19th last time. We've still seen some high case days, but the numbers are coming down in terms of the number of cases per 10,000 per 14 days. So, any questions for me about this? We haven't. This is as of last Friday. As soon as we get another file from Dodge County, we'll get these updated with the newest days as well.
So what is it at right now? Do you know?
Right now we're at 85.49.
Per 10,000, right? That's that one.
Correct. Any questions there? Next, we have our positivity rate, and as you can see, during the last period, we did go up to 10.96 for a positivity rate in Dodge County. Any questions there? Here we have our, this is the data that we compile internally, showing kind of what's happening within our walls. Thank you to our building nurses, principals for helping to get this data into us on a daily basis so that we can get this out.
Ryan, how does that compare to the last time we met, which was about the 19th this year? Can you pull that data up?
So the cumulative rate has obviously gone up. I think we're in the 50s now, I'm pretty sure. And then we're currently sitting at 6 current positive. So that one has gone down.
What was the difference in quarantine students, do you remember?
So
49 in school.
those have both gone down.
And how many in-school contacts did we have back then? 19?
49.
What's our current student infection rate with 6?
currently, that'd be 0.25%.
0.25.
125? So 1/4 of 1%.
Correct.
And our current staff infection rate would be about what?
One-third of 1%. If I'm going with 300 staff and 51.
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions for Ryan on the internal or data that's provided to us from Dodge County Public Health and MDH?
I just have one question regarding the quarantine time. I saw CDC came out and changed the recommendations. Has that changed for our district then based on that?
Currently, Minnesota Department of Health, unless it changed over the weekend, but the Minnesota Department of Health and Dodge County Public Health is not recognizing the CDC guidelines for shortening up the quarantine period. I don't know what that answer or why that answer is, but last week, I believe on Wednesday, they said, or Tuesday or Wednesday, they said it would be a couple days before they made that ruling on whether or not they were gonna accept that reduced. Right now, the quarantine times are 10 and 14 days, 10 if you've had it, 14 if you don't get it. And the CDC is recommending 7 and 10, but right now, Minnesota Department of Health nor Dodge County Public Health is recognizing those reduced quarantine period times. Even though CDC says they're safe.
No, they're looking at it,
Yep, they're looking at it.
right.
They're considering it, they're not,
They haven't made decisions yet.
they haven't made a decision.
The length of transmission time has never changed. It's all about trying to get people more compliant, to at least get some sort of quarantine time in.
Any other questions for Ryan?
Brian, the flex learning, that was pulled on Friday, right?
Correct.
Okay, so do you have the 3 school current docs of like the inflow and outflow of flex?
We could go back to previous days. So right now, this is for the 4th. So you've got 405, 64, 151, 177.
And I was just curious, the current high school one has 194. And that's like this morning pulling it, so I was curious if.
I think that might include your temporary flexes.
It does, yeah, so it's like.
Right, so I think this is the families that are choosing full flex, 177.
Okay,
So if you take a look at that, right now, I believe we're about 92.4% of our elementary kids are still in school in the in-person model. So in the high school level, I think we're at about 73% of our high school students are still in person or in the hybrid model. At the middle level, I think we're around 78, 79%.
thank you.
Any other questions for Ryan? Thank you, Ryan. Update from Amy Karen, Dodge County Public Health. Amy, are you online? Who's the 763 number? Maybe we should ask, who's the 763 number? Is that person having trouble? Could that be Amy?
This is Keith.
Oh, okay, thanks, Keith. I think Amy indicated she was gonna be in attendance today. Okay, moving on to council member comments or discussions. Any of the principals, the students, union, school board members, members at large? Anybody have any other comments before we go to the roll call votes?
I guess, well, if we have a little time, I'd like to just get a touch point with this group to see where our threshold is to say, hey, the numbers we're looking good, the velocity's looking good. We know that the teachers say that it's harder to do in hybrid, and we know that the kids are safer in the building than they are at home or in other learning areas. So what's our threshold for bringing kids back in person?
Anybody want to take a stab at that one first?
I guess I will a little bit. I guess my whole, for supporting the 7 through 12 hybrid was so the kids could stay spaced out. Wasn't necessarily that we would get them all back. I think if we get them all back, we're back in the same boat. If we do have a positive in the classroom, then we're sending 20 kids home for 10 or 14 days, whatever it is. I guess that's where my opinion's always been from what I've learned from this group and others. And then K through 6 was they were able to keep them separated more in those grade levels. So I guess, I don't know if there's a threshold for, that's the danger of going all distance or all in, is what's your number to bring them back? And I guess I don't know, but I guess I would rather keep them separated out 6 or 7 through 12 so that they can not experience the big groups of quarantines.
Chuck, I can tell you, one of the thresholds that was established back in July was set by the governor. And I don't know if it was a task force that determined the 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. And that threshold was established by them for school districts to try to define what learning model they would start the school year in. I think what a lot of people realize, or a lot more people are starting to realize, is that number is becoming a lot more irrelevant today than it was back in July, because we're testing so many more people. So as we continue to test more and more people, that cases are certainly going to go up. We knew that, and I think even now with the number of cases that we've got in the county, that number is certainly going up, and because of the more testing. So it's difficult for us to use that 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 in determining the learning model, because we're getting so many more tests. I think what's also evolved is the real data that's out there that's probably pointing a lot more towards the transmission rates in elementary school kids and how that's being reduced a little bit. They realize that it's a lot smaller than it used to be. So that internal data within a school district is probably beginning to trump a lot more of the external data, just because I think scientists are learning a lot more about COVID-19 and what the real effects on the district, or what on a district and a community are. They're figuring out what the transmission rates for children are. So I think those are some of the different changes. I don't know if I could really identify a benchmark or a metric that would tend to push us over or under limit, except if we didn't have enough staff. If the bus drivers all received COVID, it'd be pretty hard for us to maintain school. If we had a number of our paraprofessionals and our teaching staff out, it'd be pretty difficult for us to maintain school, just because we wouldn't have the people there to do that. So those are some of the limiting factors that I see as far as keeping school going forward in the future. Other comments?
Mark,
Sure.
Tim?
Go ahead.
I know Amy's not here, so she can't answer any questions, but I don't know, has everybody seen the letter that she sent for the recommendations? Okay. I'll just highlight it so everybody has that information. It was sent on Friday. She just says that at this point, we're experiencing significant community spread of COVID-19 in Dodge County, surrounding counties in the state of Minnesota. She had 122 total new case positives in September, 172 in October, 460 total new positive cases in November. The projected county rate for specimen collection dates from 11/15 to 11/28 is 108.06. We have had 2 Dodge County residents now pass away this week, last week. There's 15 that are hospitalized, 421 Dodge County residents are isolating. She mentioned male labs, I know we discussed that at the last meeting, that has a 15% positivity rate. She also mentioned, she had some information from MDH, you know, that there's been 1,888 positive cases in school staff in Minnesota since August 1, 6,200 positive cases in students. She notes that in her discussions with an MDH epidemiologist, his opinion was that he made it clear that during the pandemic, we cannot clearly state that COVID-19 is not transmitted in schools. The only way to determine this is if schools were conducting a point prevalence survey on a regular basis, such as what long-term care facilities are doing on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, which is what Fairview Nursing Home, which is Dodge County run, we're now doing that twice weekly, which is difficult because you get the test on a Monday, you get the results on a Thursday, and you're testing again on Wednesday before you even know that you got the results, so. Her recommendation, which again, she's not here to answer questions, but her recommendation is that all students should be in a hybrid learning model unless students can be in school and be 6 feet apart at all times.
I'll give you a little piece of information, stuff that I learned many months ago, but I work side by side in critical care with one of the physicians and stuff that sits on NAO's COVID advisory, or their COVID board. She's dual boarded in critical care and infectious disease, and so I've had many conversations with her over the course of the last 9 months. I remember our conversations even started back in December and stuff about what's coming. One particular conversation and stuff, and I always ask her about, you know, what she would recommend and do and everything else during this time, and she's highly for keeping kids in school. She's a pediatrician as well, and for all the reasons, benefits and everything else, that kids should be in school. As long as everyone's sticking to basic infection control, hand hygiene, wearing masks, we can essentially continue to do things reasonably and safe. One piece of information, she talked about the whole 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 model. And I asked, you know, kind of how that came up with, and she says, well, to be honest, and I quote Brandon, she goes, to be honest, the state of Minnesota asked us to create this. And so in a board meeting such as this, they created this model, and it has, she says, it's completely arbitrary. There's actually no science behind it whatsoever to say once you get to 10 per 10,000, 20 per 10,000, 50 per 10,000, any difference in transmission whatsoever. Obviously, the state had to come up with something as far as the guidance and stuff, but we're not talking about science at all. Like there's nothing to say that there's a difference in transmission. So, just a piece of information. Why that probably isn't being pushed as hard, you know, like, you know, or maybe considered as hard and stuff, is because there's no science behind it whatsoever.
As far as the 10, 20, 30, 40, 50.
Correct.
Right.
Can I get a clarifying thing from Mark, or maybe Brandon can help answer? When you talked about that more testing and we expected more cases, wasn't that part of the more testing was that the number would be dropping instead of maybe staying high or going low? Did I think about that?
Are you talking about the positivity rate?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a little bit different discussion, but.
But I mean,
Good question.
I didn't want to interrupt when he was talking about that, but wasn't the idea for more tests is to lower that positivity rate? I'm not.
I think the intent of more testing, as if you read anything from Johns Hopkins, when the positivity rate got above 5%, that's when they were encouraging more tests so that they could catch more individuals that were positive, so that they could get them quarantined and try to attempt to reduce the spread of COVID in those places where there was some outbreak. So I don't know if that explains what.
Yeah, we had talked about it before, that more testing was supposed to bring the number down, because we were trying to catch people that weren't positive too, so that there would be a higher number.
it's trying to get just a more accurate depiction of what actually is out there for
Yeah.
transmission, you know? And so it's an epidemiology marker, not to say that things are bad or worse, or 5% is like, oh no, we're all in trouble. It's just a guide for the epidemiologists and everything out there to say, hey, you know, we kind of get to this level and stuff. Are we really seeing the transmission cases and everything out there, or are we not? And so it's just a guide for them and a flag for them, and obviously it's become something so much more for everyone else. But it's just to say, hey, maybe we need to be, you know, testing more and stuff like that to actually get a more accurate depiction on what the transmission rates currently are.
Thank you. Thank you.
If I can, what I'm hearing you say, Brandon, is actually really similar to your doctor friend to what I'm hearing from Amy Karen. That stay the course essentially as long as we can provide adequate space and safety measures. Right?
Yeah, you know, and masks, you know, like in a hospital setting and everything like that, the people, you know, the individuals that are working directly with COVID patients are wearing a surgical mask just like you have on, Chris. Like, there's no difference whatsoever. The one time that we actually go to a pure N95 is when we're actually intubating or, you know, opening up the endotracheal tube and everything else and suctioning down and things like that, that you're really getting secretions and stuff that may be coming up. Other than that, there's no difference at all. And the transmission rates and everything that are happening, you know, from a patient to staff and everything are like extremely low. In addition to, you know, we're working shoulder to shoulder, side by side all day long as well, and not passing it, you know, among staff, not passing amongst, you know, things. And so the, you know, yes, the further you can get away from someone and everything else, and, you know, your aerosol, you know, particles and everything else can still leak around your mask and things like that. 6 feet, great, but, you know, that's not the be-all, end-all as well.
I'm gonna just read bits and pieces from a letter that KMEM Executive Committee sent to School Board and Superintendent Mark Matuska about, I wrote a week ago here on my copy, I think it's maybe more 2 weeks ago now. Anyway, last week KMEM penned a letter to School Board and Mark Matuska identifying the unanimous consensus of the KMEM Executive Committee representing over 150 teachers and other staff in the district. The Executive Board represents every building in this district and together likely have the best view of what's going on in our schools. This is the model we support and why. Hybrid K-12 with a schedule of 50%, 50% on for students. The justification of such a learning model is too, and I'll point out some of these things we're already doing. Develop consistency in school schedules for parents, students, and staff. Minimize exposure when positive cases are diagnosed at all grade levels. Realistically and adequately maintain 6 feet of social distance district-wide, which we're hearing is virtually impossible in all grade levels. Or I should rephrase, in some of the grade levels. Teach asynchronously in all levels K-4 while maintaining flexibility for staff and students in grades 5-12 to teach synchronously or asynchronously as they see fit. Provide the safest learning model for students and staff that can be maintained for the longest duration of time. Ensure that all students have the opportunity to participate in in-person learning and interact with peers on a consistent basis. Properly balance the need for teacher-student interaction and community health. Keep students in school as much as possible, given that we're in a public health pandemic. Moving forward, regardless of what KM metrics might be saying, I believe it's also prudent to have a distance learning environment for all students after winter break through January 8th for the following reasons. Now, this is more getting to me, okay? Provide a 10-day buffer between New Year and school, and provide a 10-day buffer between New Year and return to school. So personally, I'm just giving some feedback. I'd like to see a little time after the New Year. Return to business as usual, knowing that COVID-19 cases should have presented themselves prior to returning to a hybrid in-person teaching model. Take a 10-day buffer to take into consideration the health and safety of staff, knowing the likely degree of community spread surrounding the holiday and New Year. Bring peace of mind to staff as they return to work. And finally, I think what we all probably can realize, people are likely to disregard community health guidelines even more during the Christmas season than Thanksgiving.
Aaron, did all members of your union and everything see that letter and approve it before you sent it?
Everybody saw it after it was sent.
Before?
After.
Did they approve it?
No, the KMEM Executive Board did.
Okay, thank you.
And then it was sent out to all members.
So I just wanted to share where KMEM stands, and I can't say every teacher would agree with it, but a vast majority, as this was unanimous from every represented building on our executive board, which I think, what do we have, 18 people? 17? So I just think it's important we get that word out there. And the beautiful thing is not much different than the model we're in right now. A lot of schools are pushing for in full distance learning. We're asking for a little tweak to what we're already doing.
And I think we could also argue that the things that you were saying would benefit doing hybrid would actually benefit more being in person.
Like what?
You mentioned the relationships and, getting kids in person as much as possible, and I can pull it up and list every one of them, but
Yeah.
everyone, you could argue that an in-person model would actually be benefit to those arguments that you're making for your hybrid model.
I think is what we've got to realize here is to maintain balance. And we're so busy talking about all of one or all of the other. And I'm not sure I want to come in here and negotiate a new car. I'm not sure this is a negotiation, nor should it.
No, we're trying to
We're
do what's
asking
best
for-
for students.
Our stance, and I think we're very entitled to it, is a small tweak. And if the advisory panel doesn't agree with it, that's democracy. If the school board doesn't agree with it, that's democracy. So is the fact that we have got an advisory panel like this, where we can take our committee and share what we feel. So, I don't want to get in a tit for tat kind of negotiation. Nobody in this community appreciates the relationship we have with students more than our teachers. And we're doing it every day, so by no means are we saying we don't want in-person relationships with students. We're saying in order to safely maintain proper distance at all grade levels, at 6 feet as recommended, follow what's become basic health and safety guidelines, we need to go K-12 hybrid. I think that's pretty simple as far as what our stance is.
Maybe,
Just a couple things that I'd like to share first is, number one, I thank Commissioner Trosas for bringing Amy's message to us. A couple questions. I had about 20 questions from her report, and I was really wishing she would be here today, but unfortunately, she could not make it for some reason. She talked about the MDH epidemiologist and how he stated that they can't state it that it's not transmitting in school. I think if a lot of you remember, at the last meeting, we asked her if it was, and she said, she couldn't state either way whether or not it was being transmitted in school. But I think if you look at the internal data, I think you'd find out in a hurry that there's probably limited, if any, transmission that's occurring within the district. The other piece that is really starting to surprise me is that Dodge County Public Health isn't mentioning anything about the mental health awareness nor the suicide rates. And if we're really truly concerned about the health of our students, I would anticipate that might become a larger part of our conversation. And I know it's something that we've had a conversation on considerably. Last week I posted 2 different emails to Amy specifically stating our internal data And throughout the week, last week, our internal data on transmission rate and the number of close contacts, and 80 of 81 close contacts are also actually due to being outside of the school district. I mentioned that to her. And I don't know if she's factoring that in her decision as to whether or not she should be, on what her recommendation is for our school district. And I know there's a couple other superintendents in the area that I sent this letter to just to get some responses from them too. So we know the transmission rate for the elementary kids is low. That's what the doctors are telling us. I think that's one of the factors we really need to consider as we go forward as an advisory group. So I had a number of different questions for her, but I don't know if anybody can answer those, especially Tim, who was kind of the liaison for her in the first place. So I really want to know what the age of the two deaths were. I knew one of our deaths was a 91-year-old person related to somebody, or a neighbor of somebody I know very well. I wanted to ask her about the hospitalizations and whether or not those hospitalizations were in ICU or if they were in and out. I know that the number of average length of stay is decreasing, probably considerably, just because of some of the new treatments out there. I want to know if she had any of that. I want to know how the Dodge County residents that are isolated, how that compared to some of our neighboring counties. She mentioned the 108, which was the specimen rate for the last 2 weeks. But keep in mind that that data is 2 weeks old, and a little bit earlier today, we found out that the actual rate is 85, so it's been dropping considerably since November 20th when it was at its highest. I had some questions for her why they weren't following the CDC guidelines. I wanted to know what her response to that would have been. And I think I mentioned a little bit more about the mental health and the suicide rate and how I believe mental health and suicide rate should also play a factor in the decisions that Dodge County Public Health is playing for our school district. So those were just a few of the things I wish she would have been here so I could have answered that. So any other comments, questions, or anything before Tony?
This is kind of marking the three principles. Between now and post-Christmas, do you anticipate more kids going full flex? You anticipate more kids opting to be full online? And I don't. And I only say that because for me personally, it's about 1 to 2 per day that over the last week that are opting to go full flex. So I don't know if that's a larger trend or if it'll become a larger trend.
I think what I tell you right now, Tony, is that 92.4% of our elementary kids are in school, 78.4% of our middle school kids, and 73% of our high school kids. So we know there's a lot of parents out there that either have compromising conditions themselves or their kids do, or grandpa and grandma, and they're getting ready for the Christmas holiday and they want to make sure their kids might not be around some other people. So we know there's a number, but interesting with that number is there's a lot of people that trust that what we're doing at the school district right now is great and that they're keeping their kids safe. And when you've got a 92.4% of the elementary school students that are still in an in-person model, I think that says a lot about how well our teachers are doing to make sure that they're providing a safe learning environment as well as an educational environment.
So before we go.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
This is Marlo. I'm online here, but a lot of thoughts on some of this. I do know that one of the things I had kind of gone back and looked tonight, just to kind of stack on what Mr. Bolt said, is over just the course of the last month, there's 47 additional middle school kids that have gone online, and there's an additional, what I'm figuring anyway, is an additional 25, and that just since the beginning of the quarter. What does that mean? I don't know, but it is something I guess I just had noted. The other piece is I do feel like I've done a lot of talking to, my access is primarily students, and primarily in that 7th through 12th grade age group. I've tried to touch base with some elementary parents, but I will admit I'm not feeling this connecting. Even though we serve elementary kids, we're not seeing their parents. So I get the gist from the kids, I don't get it from the parents. But I do know that in my conversations, there's been some surprising trends that I have come out of all these conversations, and I'm trying to not ask leading questions. I'm just trying to let them flow with whatever their thoughts and impressions are. But overall, I was really surprised to hear that people are feeling safe. Now, I don't know that that's every teacher in the district. The kids are feeling safe. They could not tell me that they didn't feel safe. And that, I'm like, number one, that's our number one goal right now, I think, is that we gotta feel like we can put them into a safe environment. Again, I'm not saying that speaks for everybody. I'm not saying that speaks for every teacher. But the kids that I spoke to, and it was primarily, like I said, 7th through 12th grade, because that's who it's my kids, it's their friends, we've got high school staff. So I thought that's awesome, and that is due to all the hard work and the time and the diligence that all of the staff and support staff, teachers, whatever, have, the bus drivers, it's everybody, janitorial staff. So that's hugely appreciated. And I know that we keep bringing up mental health, and that's where I'm struggling right now, because I do understand they need to be in person, and the kids understand that they need to have that contact and they need to be in person for that reason. But I think we need to look at the next level of overall wellness, because I'm not seeing overall wellness on the part of many students and on the part of a lot of staff. And that part, it's taken me a while to figure it out. I'm like, okay, well, they're there. I mean, my daughter's one, she said, I know I want to be there because I want to see people. She feels more alone right now than she did when she was online full time. And some of that's just the nature of the setting right now. That they can't do group work. Everybody's in math. And a lot of that we can't control. But I think it's just the idea of acknowledging that this is just because I don't want to equate them being in person with good mental health. And so that I just want to throw that out there, because I'm not sure how we are as a school district assessing where teachers are at and where students are at and where their challenges truly are. Because there was the fact that they are feeling like there is no set schedule, there's no routine. That was another big one that came out. They're feeling like everything's just like blah, even though it's 2 days, in and off. And so that was surprising. And so those are just some things that popped up in these conversations that I can share more at a later date, but or would love to have more conversation with you. This is maybe not the place for that, but I just wanted to bring those things up.
Maybe it's a good time to ask our students, what are you thinking? What are you hearing?
I would say similar to what she's saying. I guess it's different being in school when you can't do group work or you're all 6 feet apart. Obviously, Ever and I've talked to, want to be in school. We want to be with our friends. You learn better when you're in school. Teachers are doing the best they can, but when I go to school, my 2 days a week is kind of when I'm in school. When I'm home, I don't learn nearly as much as when I learn when I'm in school. And so, yeah, and that's kind of what I've heard from everyone I've talked to. You learn a lot more when you're in school. And I feel safe going to school every day. I mean, everyone I know wears their masks. We put hand sanitizer on every time we come in and out of school. We clean our desks, we clean the areas in the TLC or the lunchrooms, or where I don't eat lunch at school, but my sister does, and she says she feels safe doing it, so I feel safe being in school.
I completely agree with everything Ellie said. I feel 100% safe in all my classes and everything I do. I mean, even band, I feel completely safe. We're socially distanced, and every kid wears their mask to their best ability while playing an instrument. And just like Ellie said, the 2 or 3 days that I am in school that week, those are the days I look forward to. Those are the days where I get to see my friends. Those are probably the days I'm happiest in the week, and those are the days I am learning.
Mark, I
Jim.
can't answer for Amy, but there are some things that you had questions on that I just want to talk about. When you talk about suicide rates, that's not public health, okay? That's separate. Cause of death is tracked by the coroner, and the county gets a yearly report on what the cause of death is. So I get it, we want to know some of this data, but it is not easily attainable, okay? So I don't want to simplify it or make it sound like I'm making a light of it. That's just the reality.
That's good for me to know, because I always figured they tracked it. So what department would track that, Tim, do you
The
know?
coroner.
The coroner's
We
office.
work with, it's like the Southeast Minnesota Regional Coroner, and they provide us a report usually February or March. And they give us back data, they give us the most current year data.
And is that something that they would provide to a school district?
That, I don't know, they just come to us, give us their report, we ask a few questions at the county level, and that's about it. I'm sure they would if somebody asked, it's public data, because it comes to the county.
So that's the Southeast Minnesota Regional,
I can check to make sure on what that's called, but I can get you that information of who to contact.
yeah, I'd like to see that, I'd like to, check to see what Olmsted, Steele, some of the other counties are, just so that we have a little better feel for what some of those suicide rates are, because I think that's something that's getting a little overlooked in this discussion, so, and the mental health
Well,
part.
and that's,
so.
and one thing to remember too is it's where they die as well. So just because their address might be Caston, if they die in a car accident in Olmsted County, that's an Olmsted County death. So it's as good of data as we can get based on the systems that are out there. As far as mental health goes, again, that's not public health. And I know it says health in it, that's actually Minn Prairie. Minn Prairie, South Central Human Relations Center, Fernbrook, those are the ones who are dealing with mental health. And again, that's really, they might be able to give you some data, but they are really, we're gonna be very protective. I mean, that's HIPAA, that's health data, we're gonna be pretty closed end on what data we give people, because we don't want people making inferences, we don't want them making assumptions. So I know it's frustrating, I wish Amy could have been here, I don't know why she's not. But, I mean, those are some of the things that I wish she would have just said. I think she wants to try to get information and try to answer it, but it's not really her area. A pandemic is her area, but it's truly not their Dodge County specialty. And again, Dodge County Public Health is gonna follow what MDH says. So if MDH has decided for whatever reason to not follow CDC or to take their time to make sure it's the right thing for them to do, Dodge County Public Health is not gonna go out rogue on their own little horse and charge off on their own distance. They're gonna follow what MDH says. So I just wanted to clarify some of that it would have been good if she could be here. The rates, it's like anything, I appreciate Brandon, the person you work with, but I'm sure all of us probably have read something or talked to somebody. There's so much other information across the spectrum that it's tough, and I appreciate what the union is trying to do. I appreciate what all of the principals are trying to do, and the school board. There is no right answer. I don't know what it is, and Marlo had some good points as well. I see it with a daughter who's a teacher and the struggles that she is having, especially being split in the middle school, where you've got some kids that are hybrid, you got some kids who are in person. She's special ed, and she's going, I don't know what the heck to do. So I get it, and I understand it, and it's just tough. And the school board, you're in a no-win situation, no matter what. I feel for you guys.
And Tim, maybe this is a good cutting off point for me, because I had a conversation with board member Olson, who shared that through the community, they were asking about rationale for why we make our decisions. And I can't speak for the entire board, but I thought that it was probably wise for me to put those into some kind of document and share some of that. So I did that today, and I just shared it with Ben just before the meeting. And I'd like to just walk through it. It's a few slides here, and this is my personal rationale how I make my decision. But really starts here with, I'll just walk through, but Governor Walz and his direction, the CDC director, Robert Redfield, the National Institute of Health, Dr. Fauci, down into more local, where the Mayo Clinic, Dr. Poland, who's a virologist and probably the life work in virology, is retired now, but continues to have a pulse on that. And then to the University of Minnesota and Dr. Osterholm, who worked with Governor Walz and with the Mayo Clinic in a bunch of these areas that we've been talking about, and transitioning into what we discussed a little bit earlier in the mental health, both nationally within the county and then locally here at the school. And then into the in-district metrics that Mr. Hill shared with us, and the risk to staff and students, and then Dodge County health, or Dodge County metrics a little bit, and then into the Safe School Plan review, and then also taking into the County Advisory Committee and the conversation we have here. So the very first slide you see there, and I know people on online maybe can't see this, so I'll read a little bit of this. This is the most recent conversation that, a briefing that Governor Walz had on the schools, and here's what he said. He said, all of this comes down to family and each and every one of you. And I just want to be clear, very clear, the teachers and the caregivers, the folks that are there doing everything they can to make sure child care or to get kids back to where they need to be, in-person learning, those schools can no longer stay open because the teachers are getting it in the community. Not in their school, not in their daycare, but in the community. And that's shutting us down. And he goes on to say a little bit more, and that link is valid. I'll share this document when we're at, but that link is valid. You can go click on that and see that press briefing, and there's the time in which he makes these references. So I use that as a guidance. The next piece is really the piece with Dr. Redfield from the CDC. And here's what he said on the 19th, and this is the day that we had our last meeting. I used some of the same information to make that decision that evening that I will use today. But the CDC never did recommend the closure of schools, nor do they recommend it today. The data they have says that K-12 schools can operate in a face-to-face learning model, and they can do it safely if they follow the protocols. And that came up earlier. And he goes on to say the infections they identified in the school are coming in the community, not in the school district. And that next point, the truth is K-12 is one of the safest places you can be from their perspective, is to remain in school. And he says it would be counterproductive to actually not have kids in school. And so you can go follow that link there if you like. Then going on to what did Dr. Fauci say most recently? He said, close the bars and keep the schools open. That's what we really say. Obviously, one size doesn't fit all. It goes on to say, if you look at the data, the spread amongst children and from children is not really very big at all. Not like we would have suspected. And that was another video there you can go follow. Going more local to Dr. Poland, again, maybe the most, certainly one of the most respected individuals, vaccinologists and vaccine experts, infectious disease experts in the world, right here locally. And he said this on November 17th, when I look at it based on the data, let's say grade school kids, I don't see a reason why grade school kids can't be in session. It's pretty clear, many nations have done it with appropriate social distancing and protocol, given that young kids, now I'm talking about ages 10 or younger, don't transmit it very well at all. They don't do it efficiently. Now you'll have other experts that come in and say at age 12 and 14 they don't. You'll get different, but this is the most conservative right here. So I always use, I try and use those people that people have heard of. Dr. Amy Williams, she's really the spokesperson for Mayo Clinic down there in Rochester. You'll see her on all kinds of podcasts and doing things. And here's what she said on the 24th. We're still in a surge, and I think we would be remiss not to understand we're in a surge, and a lot of physicians and experts will tell you that it's not the week after, it's 2 and 3 weeks after that we will actually see that spike. So this week isn't the week. If we took this week off, there wouldn't be much benefit. So they're saying we will see another bump on top of this bump we're seeing right now, and we can expect in the next week or 2 weeks for that number to go up. It's not going to be unexpected, and that's what she says right there. But what she does say is she goes on to that second piece, and she says that what's changed dramatically is the tools and the treatments that they have now, especially at Mayo Clinic in Rochester, that they're using as the monoclonal antibodies that they're doing for outpatient now is making a significant difference. And again, I'm not a medical expert. I'm reading and I'm watching hours and hours of this stuff on a weekly basis, and I'm bringing the information back to you here, so you don't have to spend hours and hours. You can click on any of those links and go see this stuff yourself. Moving on to Dr. Michael Osterholm at the University of Minnesota. And by the way, as I'm going through this, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask those. right now, or even after. But he said, closing bars and restaurants is critical to keeping schools open. We have to ask ourselves, why do we not do that? And then he goes on to talk about compensating, because we really are shutting down the economy for some people and putting them out of work when we're closing these bars and restaurants. So I think the point he and Governor Walz talk about is, if we're shutting these businesses down and putting these people in straight, the reason is to keep kids in school. And so, again, I'm kind of paraphrasing that, but that's how I read what they're saying. And then his appearance on CNN, when he emphasized the importance of keeping kids, especially elementary kids, in the classroom. And he talked about separating a little bit. You know, we talk about schools in general, but you have to start to separate those, because the younger kids just do not pass it well at all. And again, you can follow those links there. CDC, and we're talking, Superintendent Matuska talked a little bit about the mental health piece of this. You can see what the CDC is recently reporting. 5 to 11-year-old increased 24%, and 12 to 17-year-old 31% increase for mental health related visits they're seeing at the national level. In Minnesota, Governor Walz at his November 19th briefer, he brought up NAMI and had Sue Aberhorn talk at NAMI. And the reason he brought her up is because he understands that the mental ramifications of being in this pandemic, as long as we have, and what's coming forward, mental health is becoming more and more a focus that we have to look at. And in that last bit of that statement, 1/3 of students have thought of suicide or death. Young adults, he says. Moving on to a little bit more local there, is in Dodge County. So I went back and I pulled the data from 2014 to 18, because like Mr. Tosif said, that data doesn't come out right away, but you can go back and grab it from 2014-18 from the Minnesota Department of Health. We average about 0.5 suicides in the county a year, okay? Right now, in 2020, we have 3. So we have, it's at least 3 times, it's likely more like 4 or 5 times the 5-year average. And I think it's a very valid point that people are bringing up now, even locally. And if we look within our school district, before our last meeting, we had a conversation and asked to pull the local in school, what we're seeing, and here's what you're seeing at the high school. And you can see they're talking about significant increase in the walk-ins that are struggling with various social emotional concerns. And you can read through that. But we're seeing the same thing there at the middle school here in the district. If we move on to the COVID metrics, Mr. Hill talked about that. Superintendent Matuska talked about it a little bit. I think because our staff is doing an incredibly good job in an incredibly difficult situation, following those protocols, we are seeing very low spread in the school. And as far as staff, Dodge County Health Department has not confirmed, or is unable to confirm, any transmission to staff from students in the school building. Doesn't mean it hasn't happened, could have happened, we can't confirm that, okay? So it just talks to the safety a little bit. I'll go on to the safety a little bit more. You have 5 to 17-year-olds in the United States, so I'll talk to this graph a little bit, this pie graph. In the United States, if you're 5 to 17, and they kind of group them differently than the state, but 0.1% do not recover from COVID. At the 18 to 49, which is the majority of our staff today, you're looking at in the United States about 0.2%, and 50 to 64, and you see it's 1.3. In the state of Minnesota, we do better there, 5 to 19, and that's how they track their numbers. We don't have any deaths in that range for school-age kids. We had 1 infant who never showed up to the hospital that did pass away a number of months ago, but in that 5 to 19, we don't have any passing of any students in the state of Minnesota at this point. 20 to 49-year-olds, 0.5% do not recover, and 50 to 64 is 0.5%, okay, do not recover. If you go to the next slide there, and by the way, just so you know, all those links are valid, and that date is from either the 4th on Friday. This next slide is the 4th because that's the latest data. I pulled it last night for the 6th from the one that we just talked about. So it is the data, most current. Moving on to hospitalizations, again, this is the stuff that only comes out weekly. 5 to 19, you're seeing just under 1%. 20 to 49, you can see those numbers. And then if we move to ICU, and we talk a lot about that, and talk about the new tools and treatments that we have, you're seeing, you can see those numbers down there. 0.2% for 5 to 19-year-old end up in the ICU, and I'll let you guys read those. But that link is valid there if you want to go find it. It doesn't show up like this, but you'll see the raw data. I just pulled it into these pie graphs to show the information. Moving on to Dodge County metrics. Again, Mr. Hill talked about these, but again, these rates we do expect these to see a bump on a bump, so we'll see these go up in the next couple of weeks. But it's the data we have. Positivity rate, and Travis talked a little bit about that, where we at with positivity rate. You know, that's information I use, but again, I'm looking at the rest of that information also. And then I kind of follow up with this last piece, the Safe School Plan, because first of all, you have to have a plan, and then you have to follow that plan for you to have those numbers in the district that we have right now. You'll hear about some outbreaks across in different areas of the country, or in schools in different countries. If you track that data back, and I've gone back and looked at it in Italy and in Canada specifically, there are two things that always comes down to when they have outbreaks in schools. One is they don't have a good protocol and they're not following it, and our staff again has done an incredibly good job in a difficult environment to follow those protocols. So the protocols, and the second is the ventilation. They're seeing as people come inside, the ventilation's got to be appropriate. In Canada, for instance, those schools there 3 times what the recommended parts per million was in the CO2 when they tested them. So those rooms were sitting at 2,100 particles per million, or 2,100, and you're supposed to be between 700 and 800, and we are below that, and JJ's done all that work to make sure that we are below that. And so you hear some of these things, but then bad news sells, I'm sorry, but you have to dig into them. So when you dig into them, you get more information. So the safe return to school, us sending elementary kids into individualized doors instead of through some doors into their classroom, staying in there for lunch, rarely getting out, flipping the classrooms at 5th and 6th grade. Those are, along with the hand washing and the social distancing, face mask wearing. That's why I believe that we're bucking, and maybe we won't always, but that trend even locally here in the school district, because our staff has done an incredibly good job. So the final thing is that I look at is this recommendation and the conversation that happens in this room, and I take that into account also. So I just wanted to share that because it got brought up, and I thought that it would be good information for maybe people to have, and we'll make sure that that's available, that whole slideshow is available for you. Open to any questions though.
Another piece of information and stuff that I know that we haven't ever discussed is how our students are doing academically. Like, we're an academic institution, and the principals and everything shared some information here this last week, and I really, really appreciate Josh and Trent and Ariana and stuff for bringing information to the school board as far as how quarter 1 went. But there's a significant change in how well students are doing both in the high school and the middle school specifically right now academically from where they were a year ago. And I don't know how much all that information and everything could be shared and stuff, and I'll just kind of leave it at that right now unless anybody else wants to jump in. But it is very surprising on how many kids have failed classes this year compared to last year.
And again, I'll jump in only to say that our staff is doing a great job. It is very difficult in the middle of a pandemic, and you're trying to keep kids engaged at a distance is a very hard thing to do. And it's maybe students do better that have engaged parents, and if you don't have engaged parents, it's a struggle. And so our staff, this is not, I believe our staff is working harder than they've ever worked before, and I understand it's a very, very challenging time. And so, but it's, the reality is, the students are, as Brandon said, for some of them, it's not going well.
I'd like to compliment our staff, first of all, for keeping the rigor and keeping that expectation for attendance. And I had a feeling that we might see an increase in some of those failing grades, but only because the expectation for this fall was so much different than what that expectation was last spring. And I think if everybody remembers, the governor came out and said, we're not gonna be failing kids, and kind of turned and looked the other way on some of these attendance recommendations. But our staff has been keeping up that expectation for attendance. Our staff has been keeping that rigor expectation, whether you're in the classroom, whether you're in a temporary flex, or whether you're full-time flex. So what our teachers have done to keep that expectation should be commended, and I can't thank them enough for continuing to do that, because that's what's making the difference right now for a lot of our kids, is that our teachers are setting that expectation high, and will always continue to set that expectation high. So thank you to our staff for doing that.
I think it's also worth noting that not just keeping the rigor, but they're also tending to the mental health that you're talking about of our students. And our teachers are really in tune to the kids, and I would, I know that the principals, and Nicole and I have just spoken too about those students who weren't successful as we thought they could be Q1, and what are some of those emotional issues that they're having. And making sure that we're getting ahead of that, using that Sabres, or I know like the high school is just starting to implement the habitudes, and so I think it's important to note that too, that on the front of that, yes, academic rigor, but also trying to dive in. I know, Josh, you've made a lot of educational neglect calls and things like that, and so thanks for doing that too, because I know that for me, it's a really important piece to all this. So.
Mark, if I could make a comment to that extent, when we're looking at, and Mr. Langlow and I appreciate this so much. We met for probably an hour this week collectively, talking about failure rates at the high school for Q1, some creative solutions. Ashley Kaplan and I spoke on Friday afternoon for about an hour about looking at that Q1 data and how that won't be an issue for Q2. As we're talking mental health, I look at that failure rate a lot, and it honestly makes me nervous. And as we're navigating calendars for January, February, March, moving forward, I think whatever we could do, and PLC time is structured this way, I think whatever we could do when there is prep time added in the future, if it's in the middle of a week, or if it's not on a weekend bookend or a break bookend, to really be able to access those kids. And that's why I continually bring up the flex point, because as we look at the failure rates, it is some of the kids that are full flex, and it's getting to them that is still becoming an issue. When a lot of the high school staff are subbing during their preps, then it's navigating how to get to those kids if they're not able to do it during prep or during class, or navigating that. This is just band and choir. Andrew and I have taken to all call choir kids that are failing during choir, and then he will do the same during band for band kids. And we've had to have those structures in place to make sure that we're getting those kids up in that way, shape, or form. I appreciate the creative planning that me and Mr. Langlow have been doing. Mrs. Kaplan has talked about even taking 2 hours a day, if feasible within her schedule, just literally call failing kids and navigate what to do to the best extent possible to get them up and make them feel seen and feel part of that conversation. So just a comment kind of moving forward to that.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And Tony, I appreciate that also, because that's a big piece of the conversations that I had with lots and lots of students, is that they are not feeling like they have the opportunity to connect with their teachers, and that is a big isolation piece in the learning. And so I don't disagree with anything that you shared. I appreciate that you pulled all that together, and I think for most of us, we agree with that, and the school it's safe, it's okay for them to be there. I personally just think that our conversation needs to change at this point. We have accomplished the safety piece. I think at this point I would encourage us to keep looking at, and like Kelly said, you know, you're assessing kids and you're looking at that wellness piece and how can we better, are we accomplishing what we really want to accomplish? And I appreciate that you're keeping rigor up, but right now the rigor is really difficult for kids who are not having their basic needs met. We know that with kids. Research shows, I mean, and usually we're talking about an at-risk population. If their basic needs are not being met, it's impossible for them to learn. Right now, I guess I see this as every one of our kids right now, those basic needs are being challenged in terms of safety, their social, their social outreach with, the ability to connect with other people, the fact that their activities have been pulled out, and that's their identity formation. Like, I've got kids that can't sing, they can't play anything, they can't do anything right now, and that's where they, I'm not coming up with the right words, but I think our conversation needs to change in how can we better now meet some of those other needs so that their learning can happen effectively. Because I am seeing a big struggle, and I've got some really bright kids and some really academically motivated children, and I can't even imagine if that, I don't know how these other kids are doing it, and the families. We're engaged, I don't know. So I would like to see some more connection and opportunity for that. Like with what Tony said, I think we're missing the boat on that. So, anyway.
And I mean, Mr. Langone, I appreciate my dialogue with him so much, and this is as a band director in this capacity. Like, I don't have these creative solutions or answers to any of those things, but I do know that that's my number one right now, is how do I navigate, what are my structures and supports for those kids? So.
Well, my sister-in-law is the head of child protection. I think I mentioned this, and this weekend we were talking on the phone, and she just even said, like, they're to the point that the educational neglect side is they're really relying on schools. So thinking about that other layer that's, placed on us as an institution, and is that she's just like, you know what, we're dealing with the dire needs. Like when Marlo talks about the kids who aren't getting basic needs, like she's intervening on kids who maybe haven't eaten for a month, or haven't, not just, I haven't shown up for school for 2 weeks. She's working for a principal in a district. Like, this is, if they're not showing up, you kind of, this is you. And so, when our principals are taking that time. And so I don't know what it looks like in Dutch County right now. I only know from speaking with my sister-in-law about what's happening in Olmsted, but she's just like, we are at the dire state, like that point of, is this kid gonna live or die? That's where they're at right now, because there's so many of them, so.
Sorry, I don't mean to be speaking too much. Ken, Mark, I just have one question, and Ken, I super appreciate your data in that document. Do you feel like other local districts that have gone distance, do you know if it is out of not having the staffing, or is it out of an avoidance of trying to have staff not get sick?
I think it's a combination of both,
Okay.
Tony. I know there's some school districts that have shut down because of bus drivers.
Okay.
I know there's some school districts that have shut down because of non-certified staff availability, as well as some certified staff availability. And I know there's some districts that have shut down because the governor gave us a lot of local control, is what I was very excited about.
Yep.
And the fact that we could set up an advisory council, that the school board got to make those decisions on what they believed is best for the kids, for the teachers, and their community. And I think the school board has done a great job thus far basing their decisions on what's best for kids, what's best for the community, what's best for teachers, and how do we keep through and make sure that we're keeping the kids safe. And I appreciate Marlo's comments on, yeah, we've got the safety piece figured out. We're doing a great job of that. But now how do we focus on that mental health piece, and how do we keep making sure that kids are connected, and some of those kids that haven't shown up for days upon days upon days that are in a flex learning environment, how do we get them engaged again, and what are some of those? And I know we've got principals making home visits, talking to kids and their parents to try to get things back in gear. But that engagement piece is so much more difficult with some of our flex learning population, not all, because as I've said historically, I encourage any parent who wants their kids to be in a flex learning environment to take advantage of that. I just know there's some kids we really need to focus on as a district to try to get them back and engaged and back and attending in that flex learning model. I don't know if that answers
Yes.
your question, Terry. I'm very appreciative of the governor giving us local control over what we believe is best for our kids.
Do you anticipate MDE or MDH at any point in time, and it would probably be better sooner than later, like retweaking their guidance that they sent out this fall?
I don't.
Okay,
I don't anticipate MDE
yeah,
tweaking any guidance. I think MDH is always looking
Always,
at
yeah.
additional, I wished MDE would start focusing a little bit more on some of the other factors that are involved, but I haven't seen that happening yet.
Yeah.
So, and maybe they will.
Okay.
So, any other comments or questions before we get to the roll call vote?
I just had a question. Previously, we had brought up the concern for childcare in the community, both Marlowe, Just Like Home, and PK through community ed. What would that situation look like if we needed short-term or long-term childcare in the community?
Jenny?
Great question. I've been wrestling with that for a long time. My biggest worry in a hybrid is actually staffing. So, because all the staff will be working. So, right now, looking at it, the only thing we'd be able to provide in childcare during the school day would be for essential care children. So that limits the amount of people, and that's per the governor's orders, all we actually have to do, but that means there's probably some people who aren't essential care workers that are need to go to work that can't. So that's one thing. We still could offer before and after school care, no problem. If it's distance learning, then we have a lot more people and hands on deck to provide care for anyone who needs it. So that's the biggest struggle that I wrestle with right now with hybrid.
And we're in the same boat. If staffing is an issue, it would be something that we'd be able to accommodate for temporarily in a kind of a short-term basis. But yeah, to do it long-term, at this point, staffing is our ability to do that too.
I just want to bring up one quick thing. I did email the governor yesterday and asking for the school staff to be prioritized above the general public for vaccination. If people think about that and they would be willing to send that email, I'd encourage that to be something we do. If we're keeping kids in school, and we want to keep kids in school, and we're shutting businesses down, we need to keep the schools open, and the way to do that is to keep our staff safe. So if you get a chance, please, and you feel like you're willing to do that, send that out.
Travis, Aaron, is that something EM's looking at?
Haven't heard a thing.
Yeah.
All I know is there are 1B is what I heard.
What
So
is it?
there's 1As and 1Bs and then 2s and 3s and 4s, and I believe right now, teaching staff, and I don't know if that includes non-certified or not, but they're in line, they're 1B. So I don't know how many people are in 1A, but I know that they're looking at EMTs as a priority in our healthcare system, and then looking to some of our retirement homes. But after that, I believe, and there may be some other pieces within that, but I believe next is teaching staff falls into 1B. So I don't know what that means for a timeline, because I don't know if anybody knows how many doses are really coming to each of the states and how quickly they can produce them. So, Chuck?
I'm a consultant with Mayo, and they actually sent out just an internal memo last week saying, starting on the 10th, that they were going to have some emergency doses of the vaccine available for those that are willing to volunteer, I guess would be the right word. And they guaranteed all doses necessary to vaccinate all staff at Mayo that wants it by 2021. So that's what Mayo's telling us internally.
Okay, everybody ready for the roll call vote? I'll kick it off again. Due to the internal metrics, due to the slight reduction that we've been seeing in the number of cases in the county over the past 7 days, as indicated in that first graph, I am going to, as a superintendent of schools, recommend to the board no change from our existing learning model. Chuck Bradford.
No change.
Chris McKern.
No change.
Josh Larson.
No change.
Keith Hansen.
No change.
Missy Swartz, I don't know if Missy made it. Bria Coble.
She emailed me her vote. She had to get off the line a few minutes ago. No change.
Jenny Carrier.
No change.
Ellie Bigelow.
No change.
Olivia Matuska.
No change.
Trent Langemo.
No change.
Anthony Bolt.
K-12 hybrid, 50%.
Angie Richards.
No change.
Brandon Maderi.
K-12 in person.
Rob Hamlin.
No change.
Kent Harfman.
No change.
Lisa Parrish.
I'm going to stick with the Dodge County Public Health's recommendation for all hybrid.
Ariana Wright.
I want to quickly just highlight a few thank yous and then provide my vote. I want to thank our staff for providing that safe and healthy space for all and working with me to address any tweaks that we need to make to our system. I really want to highlight, we haven't talked about this yet, but thank our parents for keeping kids home when they're when they have or are showing symptoms and keeping a really clear line of communications open. I think that's been really important at the elementary level and has been a really important part of why our data is the way it is. And also making parents making choices that fit them and their kids and the needs that they have. And we've worked really well with parents to adjust based on what they need. And I want to thank our students for following all of our expectations. And because of all of those teammates working together, I am also voting a no change.
Tim Chosas.
All hybrid.
Marlo Bunham.
I'm gonna go with public health guidance, also K-12 hybrid.
Tammy Richard.
K-12 hybrid.
Aaron Wilkie.
K-12 hybrid.
Travis Robertson.
K-12 hybrid.
Thank you, everyone. Board will take some action on this tonight and make some recommendations. Feel free to follow along. Thank you to Pat Moran for taping this today. We appreciate it. And he'll be at the board meeting tonight taping the same thing. So Pat, thank you for your availability. We really appreciate it. Have a great day and have a great week, everyone.